Ryan Thompson wasn't the superstitious type. A hard-working accountant, he had little patience for urban legends or old wives' tales. So when his best friends, Mark and Lisa, invited him for a weekend getaway at Blackwood Cabin deep in the woods, he didn't think twice, even though the trip fell on Friday the 13th. "This place is gonna be great," Mark had assured him over beers the week before. "No Wi-Fi, no distractions, just good times, a roaring fire, and some cold beers," Ryan had shrugged. A few days in the woods would be a welcome break from the spreadsheet hell that was his daily grind. But as their car wound its way up the dark, narrow road toward the isolated cabin, an uneasy feeling settled in his gut. The sun had already dipped below the tree line by the time they arrived, casting the forest in eerie shadows. The cabin was old, with peeling paint and a sagging porch that creaked ominously as they stepped onto it. Lisa shivered, clutching her jacket tighter. "This place is charming," she said, trying to sound cheerful. "Just wait until you see the inside," Mark said with a grin, pushing open the door. The interior was dimly lit by the dying light of the day, the air thick with the scent of damp wood. Dust motes danced in the beams of their flashlights, and the furniture looked like it hadn't been touched in years. "Cozy?" Ryan muttered sarcastically, setting his bag down. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, but he kept it to himself. They were here now, and he wasn't about to ruin the weekend with his paranoid thoughts. The first ominous signs that night, they settled in by the fireplace, drinking and sharing ghost stories. Mark, the group's self-proclaimed skeptic, scoffed at every tale. "Come on, guys, it's Friday the 13th, not Halloween. There's nothing to be scared of." Lisa, however, was quieter than usual, her eyes darting nervously toward the darkened windows. "I just feel like, I don't know, like there's something off about this place," she confessed. Ryan nodded in agreement. "Yeah, there's definitely a weird vibe here." "Ah, you're both just spooked because it's Friday the 13th, Mark laughed. "Let's all just relax." But as the night wore on, the strange occurrences began. At first, it was small things, an odd creak here, a whispering sound that seemed to drift through the walls. Then, around midnight, the power went out. The only light came from the flickering fire, casting long, dancing shadows across the room. "Probably just a blown fuse," Mark said, though his voice lacked its usual bravado. He grabbed a flashlight and headed outside to check the breaker. Minutes passed, and when he didn't return, Ryan decided to go look for him. The woods at night, the air outside was biting cold, and the woods were darker than Ryan had ever imagined possible. The beam of his flashlight cut through the darkness, illuminating twisted tree branches that seemed to reach for him. "Mark," he called out, but only silence answered him. As he ventured deeper into the woods, Ryan's heart pounded faster. He could hear his own breath, harsh and ragged in the cold air. Then, suddenly, he heard it, a low, guttural growl, like a wounded animal. He spun around, shining his light in every direction, but all he saw were trees and shadows. Just as he was about to turn back, he found Mark standing by an old, rotting tree. "Jesus, Mark, you scared the hell out of me," Ryan said, but his relief was short-lived. Mark's eyes were wide, his face pale. "There's something out here," Mark whispered, his voice trembling. "I saw it. A figure, but it moved too fast." Before Ryan could respond, a cold wind whipped through the trees, carrying with it a faint whisper that sent chills down his spine. "Leave this place." The voice was barely audible, like it was carried on the wind itself. Grabbing Mark's arm, Ryan pulled him back toward the cabin. They found Lisa pacing by the fireplace, her face pale. "What the hell happened to you two?" she demanded. "I heard something. Like someone was trying to get in." The haunting intensifies. The rest of the night was a blur of terror. The whispers grew louder, echoing through the cabin like a twisted chorus. Shadows danced on the walls, taking on forms that seemed almost human. At one point, the cabin door flew open with a deafening bang, revealing nothing but the inky blackness of the forest beyond. Ryan, Mark, and Lisa huddled together in the center of the room, clutching whatever makeshift weapons they could find. "This isn't real, this isn't real," Mark kept repeating, his voice barely a whisper. Suddenly, the temperature in the room plummeted. Their breath came out in misty puffs, and the air was so cold it stung their skin. Lisa screamed as a dark figure appeared in the corner of the room, its eyes glowing a sickly yellow. The figure moved closer, its presence filling the room with a malevolent energy. Ryan could barely breathe as the entity loomed over them. Then, in a blur, it lunged forward. The lights flickered violently, and the cabin was filled with the sound of shattering glass and splintering wood. In the chaos, Ryan grabbed Lisa's hand and bolted for the door, dragging Mark behind them. The darkness outside was suffocating, but anything was better than staying in that cursed cabin. They ran blindly into the woods, the sound of the entity's growl following them like a hunter stalking its prey. Escaped from Blackwood Cabin after what felt like an eternity of running, they burst out of the woods and stumbled onto the gravel road where their car was parked. Mark fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking uncontrollably. The engine roared to life just as a dark shadow materialized at the edge of the trees. Ryan slammed his foot on the gas pedal, the tires squealing as they sped away from the cabin. In the rearview mirror, he could see the figure watching him, its glowing eyes burning into the darkness. It didn't follow them, but Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't truly free. They drove through the night without stopping, finally reaching the safety of the city just as dawn broke. The bright sunlight should have been a relief, but the memory of the previous night lingered like a shadow in their minds. A week later, Mark called Ryan with some disturbing news. "I did some research on Blackwood Cabin," he said. Apparently, it was built on land that used to be a ritual ground for an old cult. They say it's cursed, especially on Friday the 13th. Ryan shuddered, the memory of those glowing eyes still fresh in his mind. "Let's just agree to never go back there," he said. "And next time, let's stay away from anything to do with Friday the 13th. Mark laughed nervously. Agreed. But as Ryan hung up the phone, he couldn't shake the feeling that the entity from Blackwood Cabin had marked them. And every year, as Friday the 13th approached, Ryan found himself listening for whispers in the dark, wondering if it would come for him again. After all, some curses never truly die, and Blackwood Cabin was waiting.